There have been many great lyricists to come from the emo and pop-punk genres, and in this video I wanted to talk about the 5 lyricists who arguably have been the most highly regarded and or influential or impactful in these genres, and I'm sure that this list will totally be objective and not influenced by my own opinions at all. Pete Wentz of the band Fall Out Boy is the first lyricist I want to talk about. His self-aware lyrics are frequently sarcastic, make use of irony, and often use clever wordplay and metaphors about stuff like ships and hips, and his lyrics also make many pop culture references, especially references to movies, but they are also very relatable to many fans, especially his mental health struggles, while they also often touch on fame and superficial behavior and relationships. Pete Wentz's lyrical influences are fairly broad and range from Ernest Hemingway to Lil Wayne, and his writing and also his visibility and popularity as well as Fall Out Boy's popularity have made him one of the most highly regarded lyricists in the scene, and his lyrics are a defining aspect of how Fall Out Boy is perceived and a significant reason why the band has been so influential. Pete Wentz was also influential through helping sign and working with many prominent bands through his label, and his writing has influenced, at least to some degree, a number of different pop-punk and emo pop bands of that time period and since, ranging from Panic at the Disco to Set It Off to Water Parks, as well as some prominent artists outside of these genres like Taylor Swift.
Blank Space is a song that's just zingers, one after another, which I definitely learned from listening to Fall Out Boy.
And therefore, I conclude that Pete Wentz is one of the greatest lyricists in these genres, and in my own personal opinion, actually I would even say the greatest, if only for the influence he's had on me and my own lyrics. Dan Campbell of the pop-punk band The Wonder Years, also known as Soupy, is another lyricist who is arguably one of the greatest lyricists in these genres. He is very good at writing complex, poetic lyrics that are still very expressive and emotional, and he is also effective at describing specific, otherwise simple details that paint a picture in interesting and unique ways and can serve as symbols, while also connecting these details to abstract metaphors and broader, sometimes darker themes, the latter which has further developed in later Wonder Years albums. Over time, his lyrics have transitioned from his initial, more positive and lighter, easycore influenced lyrics in the Wonder Years' earlier work to more mature themes about some of the harsh realities of adulthood and growing up, and specific experiences and observations in Dan Campbell's life. And one thing that has been fairly consistent throughout the Wonder Years lyrics overall is how personal and emotional they are. And Dan Campbell has cited different, primarily indie-influenced artists like the Mountain Goats, the Weaker Thans, Bright Eyes, Cursive, Rilo Kiley, and Sun Ambulance as important influences on his lyrics.
Really incredible storytellers through music. That's the kind of shit that I kind of show up for.
Their 2013 album, The Greatest Generation, is highly critically acclaimed and is regarded by many as one of the greatest pop-punk albums of all time, in part for pushing the definition of the genre and what it can be, and this is in large part for its lyrics approaching themes that are common in pop-punk like anxiety, depression, and feeling lost, in a different, more mature and self-reflective way, and this has been very relatable and appealing to a generation of older pop-punk fans who grew up with Dan Campbell and who frequently find his unique descriptive writing style combined with these themes to be very emotionally resonant and revealing in regard to their own life experiences. And Dan Campbell's lyrics have been influential on pop-punk's overall shift in the 2010s toward more mature lyrics. And as a result, I would argue that Dan Campbell is one of the greatest lyricists in the scene. And Dan Campbell has also been very influential to me and my lyrics personally. And the next lyricist I want to talk about is Jesse Lacey of Brand New. Despite the allegations against him more recently and the fact that many of his lyrics are likely even connected to this behavior, Jesse Lacey is still commonly cited by many as one of the greatest lyricists in emo or pop-punk. Influenced by the Neutral Milk Hotel and the Smiths, among others, many of his lyrics are self-critical, introspective, reflective, and confessional and matured over Brand New's history. Their third album, The Devil and God Are Raging Inside Me, which came out in 2006, is often considered to be one of the greatest albums to come out of the scene, and a big part of the reason for this, beyond its relative growth compared to their previous albums and its artistic evolution of Brand New's musical sound, is the deeply open, vulnerable, personal, and relatively mature and thoughtful lyrics dealing with relatable themes for many like loneliness, depression, existential angst, loss, and faith throughout the album that continue to resonate with listeners. And Brand New have consequently been influential on and inspiring for the songwriting approach of a number of other bands whose lyrics have also often been praised, such as Manchester Orchestra, The Hotelier, and Citizen, and also some artists outside the scene like Halsey who noted the band's influence on her writing. For these reasons, I would argue that Jesse Lacey is another one of the greatest lyricists in emo and pop punk. And next is Conor Oberst of the band Bright Eyes, who arguably is one of the greatest lyricists in emo, to the extent that Bright Eyes music can be considered emo rather than simply indie or folk, although I think at least their early stuff is emo-ish along with his music and some other projects. Some would go further in their praise and say that Conor Oberst is one of the greatest lyricists in music in general. The lyrics he's written from the beginning of Bright Eyes when he was a teenager and since then have been consistently creative, skilled, and clever overall, while they express ideas and emotions in interesting, poetic, and often beautiful ways in my opinion.
To me, it's like a lot of it's like telling stories and, you know, painting little vignettes of life.
His lyrics have been influenced by a range of artists including Bob Dylan, John Prine, The Smiths, The Cure, Fugazi, Leonard Cohen, and Elliott Smith, and they are frequently vulnerable, introspective, self-critical, and metaphorical, and often regard themes relating to life, death, love, and aspects of the human condition, as well as occasionally political and social commentary, while his lyrics have been characterized variously as possessing qualities of grandeur, while at other times being contrastingly very intimate. And Bright Eyes' music and lyrics both have been influential on a range of different artists within emo and pop punk and outside these genres, including the previously mentioned Dan Campbell. And consequently, it could be argued that Conor Oberst is another one of the greatest lyricists to be associated with these styles. And the last lyricist is Blake Schwarzenbach of the punk rock and emo band Jawbreaker. His lyrics, which were very personal, descriptive, sharp, and direct, although also poetic and metaphorical, were unlike the lyrics of most other punk and pop punk bands of the 90s, and these lyrics often revolved around relationship problems and other concerns and frustrations directly from his journal and his life, and at the same time they also had broad appeal to listeners, although they especially appealed to angsty teenage boys who related to them and identified with them to the extent that they were often a fan of him in particular, even more so than with Jawbreaker's actual songs. Jawbreaker's lyrics and music both have been very influential, and the band has been highly regarded by many pop punk and emo bands and fans, including Chris Conley of the also influential Saves the Day, who is also a very talented lyricist with an honest, dark, and poetic style, and who has also been cited as one of the best lyricists in emo and pop punk, said in an interview that Blake Schwarzenbach was his favorite lyricist. So given all of the praise and all of his influence, I conclude that Blake Schwarzenbach belongs on the list of the greatest lyricists in emo and pop punk. And lastly, I just want to note that this video is probably more biased toward emo-influenced lyricists than pop-punk lyricists overall, and that might be due to emo's tendency to draw more from conventions and poetry compared to pop-punk, which is overall maybe a bit less lyrically complex and more straightforward, and less likely to use stuff like metaphors, personification, or other literary devices, and is also sometimes lighter in tone, and music criticism generally tends to be biased toward these kinds of lyrics, while these lyricists talked about in the video seem to have some traits in common, like being very personal and poetic, and my own lyrical preferences are overall pretty similar, and it may or may not be a coincidence that my 4 all-time favorite lyricists just happen to be on this list. And also lastly, I just wanted to acknowledge some of the many other examples of often praised or highly influential lyricists in the scene which I didn't mention, including Justin Pierre of Motion City Soundtrack, who is another lyricist who is well known for his great writing, who uses very effective imagery in unique and emotionally resonant ways that really connect with listeners. And also Mark Hoppus of Blink-182, who seems to vary somewhat in his lyrical approach depending on the song, but who in my view is more than capable of writing some very thoughtful and insightful lyrics when he wants to, including with Plus 44. And Max Bemis of Say Anything, whose lyrics are witty, light, and ironic, but also I think can be very deep and meaningful and poetic. And Jordan Dreyer of La Dispute, whose lyrics are often intricate and poetic with vivid and engaging storytelling. And Hayley Williams of Paramore, whose lyrics have been effectively expressive and have included some great turns of phrases both with Paramore and as a solo artist. And Chris Simpson of the Midwest emo band Mineral, who also effectively connected with young emo fans through very emotional and expressive lyrics. And there are still so many other great lyricists in pop punk and emo, or at least in my view. Alright, well thank you so much for watching, and please consider giving the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and also please consider subscribing if you want to see more content like this. And please leave a comment if you want to share your thoughts about who the greatest or best lyricists are, or who are your favorites and why. Alright, thanks again, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.